Silly old witches laugh and delight. Kids dress in costume to trick or treat through the night. It's time to tune in to a Disney Halloween only on
Ronald, why did McNugget Buddy so scared?
Because we're chicken.
I may be stranded, but at least I got my Fruity Pebbles.
Coming with something they never expected. Cookies. Simply roll out.
Well, there may be no sun, but it is certainly a very bright scene in Greenwich Village, and we will take you live to the Halloween parade next.
In New York, it isn't Halloween without the annual spectacle that's unique to Greenwich Village. News Channel 4's Joe Avalar joins us live from New York's wildest Halloween party. Joe?
Oh, it was an incredible Halloween party, and of course it's still going on. We just had some people stop and so they can show you their costume. We've got a little crowd over here.
Little children will be tricking and treating tonight, but Halloween is also for big kids. And right now, they're gathering for what just might be the country's biggest Halloween parade. You're looking at a live picture in Greenwich Village, where thousands are expected to show up tonight. This is the 20th Village Halloween Parade. This year's theme, incidentally, Creatures of the Night.
Witches and much more are going to be taken to the streets in search of candy this Halloween. And in Greenwich Village, you know, the place to be for Halloween. Preparations are underway for the annual Village Halloween Parade. That's tonight. And while security is always tight this year, there is additional concern in light of the war.
Halloween in New York City, one of the most anticipated days of the year for many. People from all over aim to dress their spookiest. Celebrations and costume parties are held throughout the month in anticipation of the big day. If you're in New York City, you may find yourself downtown at the annual parade. Watching thousands walk around is some of the scariest digs you'll find. For children and adults alike, fun times include carving pumpkins, watching scary movies, and getting as much candy as possible during trick-or-treating. And that's not just in New York, but everywhere. It's a dream come true for a kid. The one time of year you can gather up as much candy as possible and not get in trouble for it. No talks about cavities or having too much sugar. Just good, spooky fun with friends and family. The origin of Halloween is rooted in the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, a celebration of summer's end. They believe that during the end of the summer festival, the gateways between the living and the spirit world opened, and evil spirits would roam the streets. People would wear the scariest costumes possible, hoping to keep those evil spirits away and avoid being threatened or harmed by them. But when it comes to what takes place here among the living, you don't need the spirit world to play a role, because plenty of evil already walks this earth, and the ones committing those atrocities aren't spirits from another realm. It's the living, and it's them we have to watch out for. On October 31st of 1992, exactly 31 years ago today, a 4-year-old child waited for his father to come pick him up so they could spend the evening trick-or-treating, but he would never make it back home, and the reason why would be more horrific than any Halloween story for those closest to him. On today's episode of Evil Intentions, this is Happy Halloween, the story of Mr. Cruz. Today's story begins on October 31st of 1992, Halloween night, and takes place in Brooklyn, New York. When researching this case, I noticed that this man was named Roman Cruz and Raymond Cruz in articles. In the same article, it has both names. When researching both of these names, very little could be found about what transpired. Just to avoid confusion and avoid calling him by the wrong name, I'll refer to him by his last name, Cruz. Normally, I'd like to give you a little more background on who we'll be discussing, but there isn't much known. I'm hoping that by making this video, it not only helps keep Mr. Cruz's memory alive, but helps shine a light on his case, if it is indeed still unsolved. With so little coverage, it can be really hard to tell. According to reports, Mr. Cruz, only 34 years old, was described by loved ones as a man who always had a smile on his face, happy and pleasant, always known to be respectful. He was a hard worker, spending much of his time at his job. Cruz worked at an auto salvage yard on Pennsylvania Avenue in the East New York section of Brooklyn. In 1992, he was living with his uncle and brother on Gates Ave. It was here he would travel to work from. While Cruz was known to always be in good spirits, nothing put a bigger smile on his face than spending time with his son. He took great pride in being a good father to his son. His son was only 4 years old, and he and his father already had a tight and loving relationship. Cruz's uncle was quoted as saying, "All my nephew did was work. He always had a smile, acted respectful. He would take his son to the movies every Saturday. They were so close." When the morning of October 31st came, Cruz knew his plans involved heading to his job and later on in the evening, going to pick up his son so he could take him trick-or-treating. Countless parents around the city probably had the same plans, but Cruz would never make it to his destination that evening. And later on, when his loved ones learned why, it would leave them horrified and hoping for a miracle. Cruz would go about his day like any other. He went to his job at a salvage yard on Pennsylvania Avenue in Brooklyn, and then afterward, a co-worker would drop him off at a train station at North Conduit and Grand Abs. Now this was around 1 p.m. Now it's unclear what he did for the next 6 hours of his day, but by 7:30 p.m. that evening, Cruz would end up crossing paths with a group of people who had nothing but terrible intentions. When Cruz was dropped off, he would leave his co-worker and went on to presumably either run errands or visit friends. His family mentioned that he had several friends in East New York, but when police checked with those friends, they said they had no contact with Cruz. He hadn't been seen recently. From the hours between 1 p.m. till about 7 p.m., it's unknown what Cruz actually did or what role it might have played, if any. But what is known is that as Cruz walked on the streets of East New York, he would be approached by 3 men. This was said to have happened right by a vacant lot near Pitkin and Grants Aves. Without warning, the men would attack Cruz and drag him into the vacant lot and forced him to the ground. As 2 of the 3 men held him down, Cruz struggled to get free and tried his best to defend himself, but the 3rd man would grab a canister filled with gasoline or some other accelerant, and he would begin to cover Cruz's entire body in it. He then lit a match and tossed it at Cruz, with his body erupting into flames as he was set on fire, and he was fully conscious, fully aware of what was being done to him. For no known reason, more than likely no reason at all, Cruz's life was turned upside down in a vicious and cruel attack. As Cruz burned alive, one of the 3 men would say, "Happy Halloween," and then they ran away, leaving him to burn. At 7:30 p.m., not long after, a car sped to the entrance of Brookdale Hospital, and a man exited the vehicle, frantically telling 2 ambulance drivers that they needed to get a doctor and fast. And Cruz was in the man's car. It was said that he was a good Samaritan who might have either saw what happened or saw the aftermath and made sure to get Cruz to the hospital. When Cruz was brought to the hospital, he had burns on nearly 80% of his body. Doctors quickly began working on Cruz, removing clothes from his still smoldering body, revealing the severity of his injuries. At this point, he was still able to talk, and he told a social worker at the hospital everything that had been done to him. Cruz would then slip into a coma, one he would never wake up from. He would die from his injuries 12 days later at the burn unit at Cornell Medical Center. Cruz's loved ones stood by his side and hoped that things would turn around for the better and that he would possibly make it through this and live to tell his story, maybe even see justice. But they would get neither because there were no witnesses and no one came forward. Authorities visited the area Cruz said this might have taken place, but they couldn't find any evidence of anything like this happening. It's possible this happened on a different street and Cruz was mistaken, but officers wouldn't be able to say for sure. The man who dropped Cruz off at the hospital left as soon as they began working on him, and in an article nearly 2 years after the events took place, he still hadn't been found. Authorities only wanted to ask him if maybe he had any idea who did this. Maybe he saw something. It's unknown if authorities ever made contact with him again. Some cases like these do have closure and justice has been served, but due to the very little coverage these stories receive, you wouldn't even know it. I hope that today's video raises questions, and if this case is still unsolved, as stated, I hope this jogs someone's memory. It was a very long time ago, But it's never too late to try and get this family justice. What happened to Cruz on Halloween of 1992 was cruel and senseless. A man living an honest life with his friends and family who just wanted to spend the evening with his son so they could create new memories on Halloween. A son who at his young age couldn't help but angrily ask who took his father's life, telling his family he'll find out one day. Because of one savage act, any Halloween after this will only evoke feelings of grief and tragedy. All these years later, this family still has to ask, who are the people responsible for this? Rest in peace to Mr. Cruz, and my deepest condolences go out to his family and loved ones. You aren't forgotten.